This is Matt Gallagher, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
There's a link right there for a book. It's down below my face. That's what we're going to talk about. Get Daybreak. It's on Amazon. It's Matt Gallagher's latest book. Look, because one of the things I love about having other veterans on is we have the ability to go out and write about things in real time, real experiences, because a lot of us have been to places where we get shot at. One of my favorite things, Matt, is so I run a thing called the Ground Truth Center. We're not plugging me, but we're just going to talk about context. And the Ground Truth Center is like, hey, when you have people that get shot at and you want to go make good policy decisions, it's good to have people like us around, because we're like, oh, hold on a second. Before you want to make that decision, let's understand what like reality is like, right? You're up here in the spaceship making these decisions, but down here, here's what that looks like, day-to-day stuff. And so when you want to write a story, the same thing applies. Like, let's write a story, but this is what this is really like. People have been there. I've been there. You've been there. You do these things. So I love that we have this era of authors that are young enough and relevant enough to know the language, to know the fight, to know the smells and all these things. So I dig it that you're doing this, man. I love it. Did you think that you'd be doing this back when you had a uniform on?
Oh, it's a good question, Pete. No, I do distinctly remember kind of wanting vaguely to be a writer, but I thought that's what kind of old men did, like in retirement.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I did keep a blog when I was in Iraq, which kind of kickstarted my writing career and journey. But no, but I think you're onto something with the amount of veteran writers. There's such kind of an oral storytelling tradition within the military that you just kind of imbued in from day one. That I think it makes a ton of sense that on the back end, once we get out, that combined with our experiences, it makes a ton of sense. And there's interest. People want to hear the real deal, not the kind of propagandized version, but what the human experience of serving in uniform is, of what being shot at is like. And I've been lucky enough and blessed enough to at least tell what I think it was like, and tell people my memories of it.
There's all these micro details, and I would say even nano details that you become aware of in these situations, and it's just like I was a counterintelligence agent, so a lot of my time is outside the wire, but I'm sitting in a cafe and I'm having coffee while the patrol is I'm in the area where we've got a bubble. And so, they're doing whatever they're doing. And I'm trying to be in the barbershop and I'm trying to talk to these guys, but I'm still hyper aware. We're all like switched on and you're burning pieces of your life, really, how I would describe it. And so maybe I've got a sergeant who's watching my back while me and the interpreter are working and talking to these guys, but you're still like, this is you're granular with your attention. And then something happens, but like everything just moves in a way that only we can describe if you spend a lot of time outside the wire. And then you get the folks inside who are doing things at a different pace. And this is not in any way to denigrate or anything. Everybody is doing things at a different pace than the real world. And there's realities that are brought in that you're like, he's like, all right, sorry, my internet was popping for a second there. I've had conversations that would be wholly inappropriate here in Orange County.
Sure.
But in war, you're like, I'm going to go kill the guy. I'm like, yeah, you need to go kill that guy. Let me know how this goes. How can I help you kill this guy? It's like not a real conversation here. So talk a little bit about your experiences with that clarity, with, the stuff that just doesn't make sense here, but you have to bring into your book in a way, again, that somebody from, I don't know, some author from, and it's no knock on an author from Idaho, but they would never even think about these things because they don't know what it's like to go to, I don't know, the chow hall and be excited because tonight's taco night. And actually, like, I hate tacos. I've had taco night for 50 nights and it's like, talk about that stuff.
There's a sense of purpose, especially when you're deployed, that is hard to replicate in civilian everyday life. I think it's something that a lot of veterans, whether they get out after 4 years or they get out after 25, they talk about missing that. That's something I certainly, I didn't love the Army. I didn't, but getting up every day and trying to stay alive and keep my platoon alive. I was in charge of a scout platoon for most of my tour in Iraq. And that was important. That combined with being 24 years old in formative years, of course, that's going to stick with me after I get out. Then making a jump to being an author, being a writer, having that kind of trying to tap into that sense of purpose. I think, frankly, it gave me a bit of an advantage compared to maybe some of my peers who were writing. I wasn't just, trying to tell an artful story, a well-crafted story. I wasn't just trying to sell books. I felt like I had something important to say about our wars, about these big ideas of war and peace and the republic's relationship to its military. It helped me get out of bed every day, and honing my craft and getting as good as I could at it, to be able to convey that, to be able to tell these stories as sharply as I could, was important. But honestly, that's not why I got out of bed when the alarm went off. It's that I think probably like yourself and many others, I knew I was lucky to come home when I had some friends who didn't. So I might as well try to make the most of it and honor their service and honor their sacrifice, and tell a true war story as best I could, even in fiction, because tapping into kind of those deeper emotional truths were important, and that's this is book number 4 for me, but that kind of sense of purpose that I remember in uniform has stayed with me throughout.
There is so much in what you just said. So I just want to slow down and grab some of it and brush it off, because there's some standards that you're being held to that people don't quite understand.
100%.
And let's just start with Ernest Hemingway, who sort of establishes that standard. Like, you have to write really well. And like when he start off with one true statement. Well, that sounds easy, but he put the bar way up there.
Yeah, he did. Yes, he did.
I mean, but I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead from there.
I just have a funny Hemingway story. So this novel Daybreak, which is set in Ukraine, and it's kind of a Hemingway-esque story, because it's about American volunteers going to a foreign country, a foreign war, trying to do some good in a world gone crooked, in a world gone mad. Well, in an early draft of this, I was lucky enough to be the writer in resident at the Hemingway Pfeiffer Museum in Arkansas. It's like, he married his second wife mostly for money, and this museum is her family's kind of estate. And he was driving them crazy, so they built a barn behind the main house where he wrote like a large portion of A Farewell to Arms. So like, I sat at Hemingway's desk next to his typewriter and worked on an early draft of this thing. I snuck some beers in and drank them, trying to summon his ghost. Nothing ever came of it, but it was still a pretty cool experience, because he's he was the real deal, like you just said.
Yeah, and there's still that standard, right? Even if that ghost isn't there, that ghost is there, right? And you're still trying to live up to that, and you're still living with that. And by the way, they're like saying, hey, you've got a responsibility. So the impetus is there. And there's a thing that people don't realize, and I could say this and they still won't realize what we're saying, but when you command people in combat, you are always their commander. You guys will be 70 years old and you'll see him and you'll still be sir, and you'll be like, hey man, it's really okay to call me Matt. We're all 70 something years old now. You're like, yes, sir. And you're like, okay, all right, I get it. And you own those guys. Like you will always command them. And that doesn't change. They hold you to a standard that you are forced to. So the last guy to command a USS Indianapolis, right? He owns the World War II USS Indy mission. You think about that. Like, he didn't command that Indy, right, but he owns that entire community because he was the last, for right now, he was the last USS Indy commander.
Sure.
That's what it means to command people, is like you are the person for these people, and you are not allowed to fool around with that. You are held to a higher standard.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Went to one of my former soldiers' weddings a couple years ago, and a number of platoon members were there, and I kept trying to correct them not to call me sir, that I was Matt. so I couldn't quite get there. I also heard stories from Iraq that I had not heard before, that I'd been shielded from, protected from, while over there, probably for my own good. So it was fascinating. I thought I had a good read on everything that was going on, but I was still a lieutenant doing lieutenant things, and there was a whole different side of things that were occurring over there that they were probably right that I was wise not to have access to, but that's how it goes. I think in any military unit, right? Everybody's got their jobs and responsibilities.
Yeah. And should they get together, they're gonna be like, "Hey, sir, what do you think we should do about this?" You're like, "I'm not your boss anymore." They're like, "Yeah, that's right." Anyhow, how do you want us to do? It's not a thing that you get to get rid of. And so when you sit down to work, I don't know how much you feel that, but it is a thing that you own. Like you do have a responsibility that you just can't sit down lightly.
Absolutely. No, I mean, telling these stories, even in especially with my first book in nonfiction, but even in fiction now, like my two main characters here in Daybreak are they're enlisted men, and they go to Ukraine because they're lost. They're lost here in the States. They don't know how to adjust to civilian life, and this war kind of gives them that sense of purpose to return to. And that has not been my personal experience, but it has been the experience of men I love and respect tremendously, and doing right by them, even by taking some of those fragments and putting them into fictional characters, is vital. It's a duty in my new life, and it's an important part of my job as an author now.
This is the door I wanted you to open. I'm so glad you did. So there is a difference between Officer Matt, Lieutenant Matt, Commander Matt, and author Matt, because author Matt has to take a piece of Sergeant Jones and be like, "Ooh, this flaw, this interesting part, this thing, I'm going to lean on this, and I'm going to create this scenario where bad things happen because of errors that, but you've a different job, right? Different things so that you can create the story device that you need."
That's right. The best tribute I think I can give to a character, whether real or fiction, is to give them full dimensionality, right? That they're not just there to serve an easy purpose, a plot point, to be a joke, the butt of a joke. Even villains deserve dimensionality and deserve some nuance, because 99% of humanity is still there, Pete?
Sorry, my internet is real spotty right now for some reason. I don't know if it's weather or what's going on, but sorry about that. Please
good.
That.
Good.
I can't control the Wi-Fi today for some reason. You were talking about plot points, but I lost you. But I think I got what you were saying. Let's talk about. Did you pick Ukraine because it was timely? Was it on the list of things you were going to do? I mean, obviously we can pull right from the pages of the news, but sometimes you're ahead of things. Sorry, do you have me now?
Yep. And I got
okay. Sorry.
Yeah. No. So why Ukraine is an important question. And it's funny because I was working on a book that had nothing to do with war. I felt like I'd had more than my fair share to say about Iraq and the global war on terror, and I've been plugging away on something else. Ukraine happened. Russia invaded February 2022, and I went over there myself as a volunteer. With a couple buddies, also military veterans, to work with some civilians on real basic self-defense.
Right.
Because we got there so early, we went in on buses with veterans like my fictional characters who were going over to fight, who were going to join the International Legion, who were coming from not just the States, but Britain, Australia, Canada, even met a French guy, lots of Poles. Because they viewed this as a just cause, a just war that maybe they had not been their experience in Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria, what have you. And these guys fascinated me because what they were doing, going to a country many of them had not even been to before, to defend democracy, to defend an ideal, that's courageous. Like that is there's something real beautiful about that. Simultaneously, though, a lot of these, men, and they were mostly men, very flawed individuals, right? Lost soul types. It's not a normal thing to do to be able to take off at the drop of a hat and go to a foreign country willing to pick up a gun. And that kind of beauty and darkness mixed together really fascinated me. And even though we were busy kind of doing our own thing for a few weeks, I'm a writer. In the back of my head, I was taking notes because that's just how I interact with the world. And I was like, these guys, it's more than a simple headline. They're more than just heroes. They're more than just lost souls. They're complicated. Tapping into that, coming home. I don't know. The story just kind of tumbled out of me once we got back after that first month. And I stayed in touch with a number of these guys, some of whom are still over there, fighting in the trenches in the eastern part of Ukraine.
Yeah, it is great. And do you feel like when you think about this, do you think cinematically? Do you think I don't know, like what goes through your brain as you're putting it together? Is it beats? Are you thinking like, oh, this is like a renewal of a Farewell to Arms? Like how does that process work for you because it's like flashes of things, I imagine, that come in and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a story going on here.
Yeah. I think for me, it almost always starts with character, and having interesting, engaging characters who are going to come in conflict, are going to argue ideas, are going to see the world differently. So I think a lot of that was formed by my experience in Iraq during the surge, because we interacted so much with Iraqi civilians who had a multitude of feelings toward us as American soldiers being there. Some considered us occupiers. Some considered us saviors. Some viewed us as a great way to make money. That was a very formative experience for me, realizing how many different versions of us they were seeing and interacting with. And that has stuck with me ever since. And so I went to Ukraine first as a volunteer and later as a journalist. I realized that a lot of these Western veterans who went over to fight are being viewed the same way by Ukrainians, right? Many of them are grateful to have anybody willing to stick out their neck for them. Some are rightly skeptical because for every idealist, every honorable person going over there for the right reasons, there are some Westerners going over there to make money it's a war. It's going to attract. It's like a bug zapper for all kinds of weird shit in this world.
Oh my gosh!
And that's alive, especially in Lviv and Kiev. You see a lot of these. The further east you get out, closer to the actual trenches, those are the real deal fighters. Those are the real deal humanitarians. But in the cities, you got some real strange ducks who may or may not be who they say they are, and trying to capture that into kind of one coherent, hopefully engaging story. That's the challenge. That's why I sit down and type this thing out to convey all this to readers who, people who will never set foot in Ukraine, but are still interested in the subject.
Man, oh man, are you saying a lot of good stuff? It's so good. Yeah, and the question I wanted to ask you is how you're seen as all of these characters, and then you yourself are a lot of characters. Like you're a reporter, you're a volunteer, you're also a former commander, and you can guide and you can be a lot of people. And you're also an author, and when you're there, so you yourself are, who are you going to be? And also, I imagine you don't want to get yourself killed over there, but you easily could put yourself in a position where you're like, why did hold on, I got to back out of this thing, and deciding who you are, because that's got to be a real thing as well.
No joke. Last time we were there, we were at a gas station kind of outside of Bakhmut out east. And we were feeling really relieved because we'd kind of been in a dangerous place near some artillery. And I was like, okay, the worst is over. And as our interpreter ran in to take a leak, a rocket just kind of screamed over the gas station, and just kind of sat there. And it, every Ukrainian tried to take cover, and then anybody in uniform, as soon as it passed and it hit someplace else, thankfully, everybody starts joking with each other, telling the person that they were next to how afraid they looked. I was sitting there, I was like, it was so different. That was different than I'd been shot at before, but
Sure.
it's nothing that's coming out of the sky, artillery, in this case, a rocket, drones. This is brand new. We controlled the sky in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is a different thing, and most of the Western volunteers I've interviewed who were fighting for Ukraine talk about that, how much different it is than their previous experiences in the desert wars. And yeah, Pete, I'll be honest with you. I kind of looked at my photographer. I was like, I'm 40 years old. I'm a dad. Like, this may have been just a little too far. I got lucky this time, but we pushed our luck this time with this one.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing. As I was going, I had to learn. So I was, in with and for the military throughout my career, and I was great at all the different things. But it was really like if I was with the Army, it was like my sweet spot. But when they hung those contractors from that bridge in 2004, I'm like, I have to design new rules for what I'm willing to do, because I always had the ability to opt out, because my time in the military, whether I was enlisted or reserve, was over, right? So I always had the ability to say, I'm good. And so I drew a circle around myself, and I'm like, this circle, if you come inside of this, is the spot where I kill people, and it doesn't matter. If you come in here, I will not. And my job is not to kill people. My job is to talk to people. And if I kill people, then I have to leave that area, because I no longer can collect, right? Because that's the nature of my job. But you have to have these things. And if it got dangerous to a certain level, it's like, I can't operate in this zone because it's too kinetic. It's too lethal. I have to change the nature of how I work. But I had to learn how to set these rules up, because every fight is different. If there's stuff falling from the sky, it's hard for Pete to work, because my job is talking. My job is to be off the post, talking to people. How do you do that, right? And it's very hard. And you can go, oh no, I've overestimated what I'm able to do here, because there's shit falling from the sky. It doesn't matter how good you are at war. War decides what it wants to collect, and it can collect you in a second. And it's you can realize all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've overestimated what I'm capable of doing here, and I've got to get out of here.
Chances. I mean, it's the aspect of any war, any conflict, and you can train and train to try to minimize all that, but our good luck that day may well have been somebody else's bad luck, and having those left and right limits established is vital, because as you know, it's like a siren call that when you get there, the closer you get, everything seems normal, so you start pushing a little bit more, and that's how you get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, you have to manage the risk, and you have to be willing to say, I mismanaged the risk. I have to back out and reassess. Yeah, and that's because ultimately you're there to be an author, an author with great skills. And it's like, oh, wait, because I always say, I'm great at war, but war decides whether or not I live or die. It doesn't matter how good you are. Even the greatest warrior. I mean, I think about Mike Day. He got shot 27 times and lived, killed everybody in the room, walked out, he ultimately takes his own life from that war. It took a long time, but war collected it, and so it's a different beast. And I'm glad that you were able to see that, because some guys don't. And it goes back to the thing you said a lot. There's a lot of guys who are like, I didn't get my war. I had to go there. And Pete told me to wave at villagers and smile, because he didn't want us to get blown up. And that's not the fight that I wanted to have. They're like, nah, this is my fight. And they do go run towards the front lines. And I'm like, God help it. I hope you all survive your adventure, because that is full scale, hard ass war. And they want it. And there it is. But dangerous. And people will write books. That people will survive. People will go fight those fights. That's what I was saying.
One of the that's exactly what one of the main characters in Daybreak does. One's going back for a Ukrainian woman that he loved 10 years before, but the other, Han Lee, it's that adventure thing that he just hasn't been able to kick. And there is some of that is respectable and honorable, right? Like, we need rough men willing to do violence on our behalf, right? To paraphrase Orwell. At the same time, it's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing that even grown-ass men who should know better fall for. Yeah. I mean, Orwell's a great example, right? He himself, yes. He knew better, and he still did it.
Yeah. We can learn from these guys, right? And he comes back and he gives us some stories. He's so good at it. He belongs to everybody. Warring sides are like Orwell.
I
He's like, by the way, I got shot through the neck.
Sometimes when I see like Silicon Valley tycoons quoting him, and they're quoting 1984, and it kind of makes sense in the context. There's part of me that I'm just like, he was a socialist who hated rich people, right? Like, literally fought fascism. Just a little bit of a little bit of wider understanding of who he was as a person beyond 1984 wouldn't be the worst thing.
Yeah, I have a friend, my buddy Brad. I won't mention him real quick. He sent me a book. One of his bosses is like, we gotta be more like SEALs, and I'm like, no, that's dumb. You don't go up to your meeting door and donkey kick it and stack arms and run in and kill everybody in the room. That's not what you do. You don't stick in a dip before you go in and talk with the hatchet hand. Right. Corporate America likes to take this stuff a little bit too seriously. You don't get a bunch of cab. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm with you. I just the boardroom SEAL ethos is crazy to me.
Yeah. And whatever it's Cav or whoever it is, it's like, now that you've done all these ridiculous things, we're going to give you your spurs. And it's like, please, Silicon Valley, stop with this stuff. This stuff doesn't belong to you. Right. Yeah. Hey, so when you're writing these books and trying to build out an audience, how much does that play into what you do? Because I've got a book right here. This is a great book. Rick Rubin, right? And one of the things he says, he's like, hey, fuck the audience. You make this thing for you. You're the artist. You build what's important because you know better than everybody else what needs to happen. And so that is a way to create. But where do you fall in that? Like, is it your job to create something and the audience needs to figure it out and find you? Or is it your job to figure out what the audience needs and make it for them so that they can appreciate it and you grow from there? How do you work that part out?
I'm not quite to the point of saying fuck the audience, though Rick Rubin is brilliant. So maybe he's onto something there. I'm kind of more like Kurt Vonnegut, who he was always writing for his sister, I think. Each book is kind of different for me, but I always have one person in mind that I'm trying to, and I'm not trying to necessarily convince them, because that can be a dangerous thing, especially with fiction, is that you're trying to make an argument. No, you're just trying to tell a story, and you're trying to make it interesting and compelling. And by keeping that one person in mind, it might be a slight bit of a challenge. I find that very helpful, because it kind of focuses my energy and keeps me on task, to not give in to maybe long-windedness or strident beliefs, and just kind of focus the story. In this case, even though it's a war story set in Ukraine, this is dedicated and written for my wife, because I wanted her to kind of understand this more. She let me go on these kind of boondoggles, which was very courageous of her. And the least I could do is try to explain to her both why I felt compelled to go in the first place, and then what I saw and did and learned. And I find that helpful. I really do.
And is that a different person each time? Is that part of your device? Is it her each time? Is it just a person, an ethereal person? Or
it's always a specific person. It's kind of been, one was for my brother. I had my brother in mind, and another was an old childhood friend. For me, it's always a very specific person. But like where it comes from, I couldn't tell you. It's kind of in the seeding of the book. Is like I can see, like when I sit down with that first draft, it's like, how would this person think about this, and like what could I do to make them not just be forced to pick this up because they know me, but like be excited to turn the next page.
Yeah. And then a lot of times when we're explaining the impossibilities, it's not a linear conversation. Like, oh, I've got to stop and explain something to you about this. So when you're talking about, and then you will have to do this aside, almost like a Wikipedia rabbit hole. You're like, oh, well, hang on. So in 1879, there's a guy, you're like, wait, 1879? How did we get over here? Like, well, this is going to be important. Hold on. And so you have to, take these routes because some of these things just don't make any damn sense. Like, why do you guys wear, boots like spurs and you're in Iraq? You're not going to ride it. Well, give me a minute. So do you do that kind of a thing, or how do you deal with the timeline and explaining some of these oddities that just don't make any damn sense?
That's a great question. Because you got to tell it crooked and you got to tell it long.
Yeah.
On a craft, like,
yeah,
there's almost like two separate answers to this, right? Like on a craft level, it's really important to keep all kind of the center and the narrative momentum and all these like nice, clean storytelling techniques. You want that in the present, right? But like you just said, like the emotional essence of something, of why these characters are there, like Han Lee and Luke Paxton don't show up in Ukraine for no reason. They are grown men who were there because of what happened in Afghanistan to them 10 years before. So, it's kind of a balance you got to maintain. And what I found helpful is you kind of sprinkle hints of that past in to earn maybe a flashback scene or earn a flashback sequence. But you can't lead with that stuff. Otherwise, the audience's attention is going to be like, well, you got to remember, I started this story here because, and as long as you remember that, the braiding of the present and past will kind of settle itself out.
Yeah. And so do you enjoy writing yourself into a corner to like go, how do I work this out? Because you end up doing it no matter what you do. You're like, how do I justify this behavior? Because they can't just be like, sure, like you have to understand why that whimsical answer of sure exists. I mean, is that part of the fun for you?
I wouldn't say I enjoy it. I just, I would say I've done this enough now to know that it's an inevitability, and I have done it enough to know that I will eventually work my way through it. I do with my second book. I got stuck real bad, and I wasn't sure I could get out of it. And that was, it was dark, man. It was depressing. It was every kind of writer's worst nightmare. But I eventually got through it, and it took thinking about this, like a creator, you're always with your thing, right? Like, it never, I would get really frustrated because I would sit down and it wouldn't come to me easily. But things would come to me maybe when I was walking the dog or taking a shower or driving to pick up the kids from school, because it's always dwelling within you. It's always nagging at you. There. Which, maybe is not the most healthy way to go through existence, but is part of what we do. And so I just know that when I get to these tight spots when I'm not sure what's going to happen now, I just have to trust the process and trust myself that I'm going to be thinking about this stuff, and if it comes to me at an opportune time, just be close to a pen and a notepad. I've learned that the hard way too.
You also learn with that pen and notepad that you're never going to run out of ideas at some point. That you're like, you know what, I don't have the pen and notepad here, but I'll be able to. Like, I know how to solve this. So when I get home after dinner, I'll be able to come up with something. It's there. I'm not going to worry about that anymore. And that confidence, that comfort that you can fix that problem, that's another level up in your skill and your mastery of your craft.
Yes, and that only comes through experience, right? I don't think that this is not
scars.
Scars. Scars is a great way to put it. This is not a situation where you can fake it till you make it. You have to. You have to earn it. You have to earn your way there.
Yeah. No, I definitely know what you're talking about. And also, things get solved in the shower. They get solved during naps. Like when you put that thing to rest. One of the things that I learned through what I had to do, going out and collecting, I'm always thinking about the problem, the puzzle, like what's going on. And I learned to put my reality on a camera that moved around. And so I thought about circumspect, retrospect, introspect, all the different specs, and then scoping back. Like I had a conversation with my buddy, Andy Jingaleski. He's like a super smart, like Sam's graduate. We were talking, and I'm ground truth guy. He's strategic guy, super high end. And he was like talking about all this conflict we have going on internationally. And I'm like, okay. And he's, hyper smart on the history thing, everything. And I'm like, okay, so is this any different than, say, the Civil Rights era, the Civil War, World War II? And he's like, yeah, when you scope back, is it different? Nah. Actually, you might say it's better than ever. 1600s, really bad time to be alive. 1895, you're born then, like 1 in 4 chance you die before you're 18 years old. So is it all that bad? No. And so you start to move things around with your perspective. And then for me, when I'm thinking about projects, I'm like, wow, that creates a better approach to my problem than I even thought of. So let me back up and reapproach this from this way. And that's actually a better way to get into this problem. And then it provides this other exit too. And really just a better storytelling device of, oh, wow, okay, this whole situation doesn't even need to come down this avenue that I get stuck in. I'm going to get stuck in the middle, but I'm going to come at it from this way.
Mm-hmm. No, I think there's a lot to that. And, something you just mentioned, I don't know, like 2024 America, there's a lot going on. I get it. But people were talking doom and gloom and civil war and kind of like what you just said. It's like, okay, maybe it's not as great as 1998 or how you remember 1998, but it's not 1861 either, right? Like we're going to be okay. Like I don't know, Civil War. I don't know. Most people I see are pretty fat and comfortable for actually like picking up a rifle and shooting their neighbors. They may send some angry tweets at them or something, but like that's and there are absolutely some domestic groups out there willing to carry out some armed violence, but that's still not the same thing as civil war. So a little perspective goes a long way, and I do worry sometimes that we lose track of that in the doom and gloom of the moment.
Yeah. And one of the other things we were talking about was like, there's a challenge to shipping. Shipping is not perfectly easy to do right now. Yeah, from the standard consumer perspective, and maybe things will have to go the long way around for a minute or two, and boy, that'll make things more expensive. And so our response is, well, fuck that. Who do we have to kill to fix that? It's like, hold on, terrorist.
Right. Yeah. The Houthis in Yemen are slowing down global trade. Like all of a sudden you realize why the U.S. Navy combats piracy.
Yeah, and again, I used to love to ask. Matter of fact, I'll be a little tough on Tim Kennedy, and I'm like, we don't care about the war in Yemen, and he's like, well, let me explain to you, Pete, why. I'm like, oh, okay, explain to me why, and why Ukraine was important and Yemen wasn't, or the violence going on in Myanmar. We don't care about that, but let me explain to you why. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And I'll quit picking on Tim now, but we don't care about something until all of a sudden we care about it, and then we're totally fine whacking people. As long as my Jolly Ranchers get to me at the same price that I always get them at the store. It's pretty crazy.
Ugly truth to that for sure. That's what makes America pay attention. I mean, what's the old Mark Twain quote? War is how Americans learn geography. Something like that.
Yeah, for 5 minutes, right? Until we forget about it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's also
Where is Iraq again? Yeah. Well, so the point of this conversation, though, is the fact that Daybreak is about to break, and that's going to come out in what was it? In 10 days, right? No, 11 days.
February 20th. February 20th. Yep.
February 20th, it drops, and everybody can get a pre-existing, or you guys can get a pre-sale copy. And I always say, buddy read. So you buy 2 copies, one for you, one for your friend, and you get this fantastic story straight from the fields of combat in Ukraine right now. And it's a love story, straight like Ernest Hemingway style. This is fantastic. What is next for you, man? Like, what are you working on now? Because obviously you have something in the works.
It's a great question. I have two kind of main projects I'm focusing on now. I live here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and through kind of one of those strange happenstances of America, this is one of the largest cities that's resettling Afghan refugees. So,
no kidding.
Yeah, so I'm doing a long story of what that experience is like for these people. Many of whom didn't immigrate; they fled the Taliban, and here they are in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of all places. And some are thriving and assimilating very well, and some are having a hard, like any group would and has over the course of our country's history. Some are having a hard time, and again, kind of capturing the human dynamic and all the complexities of that is something I'm doing in kind of a long journalism article. And then the book that I was writing before Ukraine, and I'm getting back into, I'm from Northern Nevada originally, and I just mentioned Mark Twain. And before he was Mark Twain, when he was still Samuel Clemens, he spent some time in the mining city of Virginia City. And
He sure did.
yeah, and I have a historical novel about him and about 1860s Virginia City that deserves my time and attention. If the world would just slow down just a bit, so I could focus on that, I would really appreciate it. If the world would just let little old Matt Gallagher get back to his historical novel.
I cannot wait for that. We need more things like that. I am such a big fan of Mark Twain's work in that time. Whether it's Calaveras Frogs and all that stuff, but that whole time of his, because we have the stuff that we, a lot of his stuff we just know. Really, he's more of a legend now than someone we read. But all those works, Roughing It and all of that, it's so good. And I'm glad that you're going to enter into that world. I have a project that's similar in time frame that I'm working on, and it's California based, and it's a time that is just rich with just wonder and images, and so I'm excited to have the world slow down so you can work on that. I can't wait to hear about that project. It's fantastic. I love it.
It's cool. I've learned a lot about my home state, my home area, and I think it has a lot to say about America, right? Like the humor that we associate with Twain. He belonged to like a school called the Sagebrush School. And that kind of it emerged out of like the wreckage of the Civil War, right? Like people needed to laugh again. They needed to tell tall tales. It is very much connected to that conflict and the survivors trying to find life after so much destruction.
And he is one of the people that there's certain people that come to us and have the gift and they survive. One of them's Laura Ingalls Wilder, who they do go abroad. And it was such a interesting, people who are folks and they can write and say, hey, I went out to San Francisco for the World's Fair like she does. And she writes letters and you read the stuff that's not just the Little House on the Prairie stuff. And wow, what a marvelous storyteller she was. And you think about, I don't know if you've read any of the stuff with her and like her daughter and her friend driving in their Model T or Model A across the country, but it's just fantastic, because she's so gifted at writing these incredible stories. But so Samuel Clemens goes across the country and travels all the way to Hawaii, and these are just treasures of American writing that are largely ignored. And oh my gosh, once you get into them, they're wonderful. So I'm really excited to hear about that. And anybody who's amplifying that kind of history, I think it's great.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder, kind of what you were talking about earlier. Like you take a step back. The 1870s seemed like a long time ago, discovering the American continent. Well, they were asking a lot of the same questions we're asking, right? Like, what is America's role in the world? What unites us as a people? What are the ideals we believe in collectively? Can we reconcile our very pronounced partisan differences to go on? And asking those questions about 1870 may seem quaint now, but they're as relevant as ever, really.
Yeah, and it turns out, because I've been on the road quite a lot too over the years, and if you go to Battle Mountain, Nevada, there's people there, and here's what they care about. They care about being able to pay their bills, maybe scratch together a little bit of money, taking care of their family, and just trying to figure out how to get by. And then if you go to Topeka, Kansas, same story. And if you go to all these places, folks end up being folks if you let them. But if you get in the TV too much, you're like, we're going to fight. Like, you know what? If you go out and meet people, then the first thing out of their mouth isn't like, what are your politics? That's not it. And even if you do have different politics, you can have a conversation with them. And they're like, that's reasonable. We disagree, but that's reasonable,
Right.
And that's usually how people work things out.
100%. We moved to Tulsa from Brooklyn, New York, and pronounced change in many ways, but by and large, people are people, and you just got to talk to them and listen to them, and more likely than not, you may passionately disagree with somebody, and God knows I have in my life disagree with plenty of people.
Yeah.
More often than not, though, people have a reason for believing what they believe. Yeah. And if you can tease that out of them, it's kind of a hard thing to just dismiss on kind of a blue-red level.
Yeah. Now, do you know Jeff Clark? He's out there in the Tulsa area.
I know the name, but we've never actually met.
Yeah, he's also military, also author, and he has a pod. I'll introduce you to him. He's got a podcast too. You guys probably ought to run into each other. Yeah, the Afghan thing is such a challenging thing because we've got this permissive policy of immigration, but we didn't with all these interpreters, to include the Iraqi interpreters that put themselves at great risk, and it just breaks my heart that we left these folks behind and then left just dudes like us to go, okay, well we'll go get these people out. So we put regular everyday Americans at great peril. Also our allies, like the French Afghans who are out there, and we're just like, see ya. And again, you are left to go out and sort out American policy in Oklahoma to help these folks get by. And it's crazy to me that we are so indifferent towards this problem and so caustic towards another one. I just can't wrap my head around it, man.
It's like we can only focus on one thing that's happening in the world at the time, right? Like for a while there, Ukraine was front and center, and everybody had a Ukraine flag emoji, or if not a real flag, on their porch. Then Gaza happened, and Ukraine felt, now we can't even get our Congress. Yeah, exactly. Congress, we can't even get an aid package through to these people that desperately need it. And it's going back to Afghanistan. The thing that drives me crazy about that, and I kind of supported the withdrawal. I thought 20 years was long enough. But for Christ's sake, the fact that after 20 years, that we planned our exit after the September 11th anniversary, it was still about us. It was still about American hubris, rather than, planning. Hey, we all know that there's a fighting season, right? And that everybody goes home in the winter. Why not give the Afghan government a semblance of 3 months to get their shit together? We pull out in November or December, the Taliban aren't going to be able to attack in mass. But no, again, even after 20 years, we didn't learn anything. It was still about us. It was still about our hubris, and things fell apart quicker than anybody expected as a result.
Not anybody expected. If anyone would have talked to
anybody in charge expected. You're right.
Yeah, because if someone would have talked to Ground Truth Pete, I would have said, wait, no, that's not going to last 1 second, because the deal's already in place. The people that have deals are going to slide right over and be part of the new team. That this is not going to last 1 second because there's not really a government there. And I'll be told, no, you're wrong. I'm like, no, well, you're not there. I'm like, I'm there, and there's no government. There's not in place. And so either people are going to get killed or they're going to be part of the new team. And guess what? They're going to be, they're going to move over to the new team. And you're right. Like there is no fighting season for us. We move when we want to move. We'll just move. And you're right. Would have been a lot better if we were going to pull out. That was the decision made. And I don't want to hear from the president of the United States saying, well, the last president made a deal, and I guess I'm just stuck. Like, that's bullshit. You just say, we're not leaving. I go, okay, what are you going to do about it? You're the boss. You're just like, no, we're not leaving. We'll let you know when we're going to leave. And you go. The other thing that we do really badly with all this stuff is we don't let our partners know that we're actually leaving. I've been one of the last guys like we talk to in a region as we pull back in Iraq or wherever. I'd go to the government like, hey, no shit, we're leaving. You got about 10 days. What do you want to do before we go? Because there's some stuff that we're going to leave behind. What's important to you? And they look at me like, ha, you're joking. And I'm like, I'm not joking. I'm being 100% because we want to maintain OPSEC. And I'm like, these guys need to know that we're no shit leaving. And then they look at you with terror in their eyes and they go, Pete, if you leave, I'm going to die. Words I've heard directly. And I'm like, we're really leaving. So if you need to run, you should run because we are leaving. And then they'll say, well, I need electricity. I need fuel. And all I can tell you is that we're leaving. And we suck at that. We just fucking leave people behind. We're the shittiest partner because we will lie to you and then we will peace out in an instant. Poof, gone. And then all these women we told that they had the right to learn, the right to vote. What happens to them? It's unspeakable. It's horrible. Anyhow, I don't want to talk about that shit.
No, it's maybe going to happen again with Ukraine, right? Like, how many times did we? We're here. We're your ally. We're here to defend freedom and liberty for good. Don't worry. We're a long-term stable partner. I know from Ukrainian friends over the sense of betrayal that they feel already is palpable. Towards us and some other Western European allies.
Yeah.
If we keep going down this road, it's only going to get worse.
we're not trustworthy. Ask the Kurds. You know, how many times can we turn our backs on those guys? You know, it's a thing. Hey, I'm excited about that book, and the you know, he's the Samuel Clemens book. It's going to be exciting. Virginia City, right? That's what you said. Is that where you're from?
I'm from Reno originally, but
Reno. Okay.
Yeah, down the hill, steep hill, but just down the hill.
Yeah. So what keeps you from focusing on that? I mean, I know the world needs to slow down a little bit, but what, like, is it just that, you know, we all have projects more than we can do, right? Is it just like one of those things where you can't get it on the front burner?
You know, with this one, it just felt there was an urgency I felt with telling this story that maybe in my, you know, I'm not a retired general, so I can't go on CNN and talk geopolitical machinations. You know, I'm not a think tank person that's going to analyze stuff that way. I'm a storyteller. And if I can maybe get people who otherwise aren't super engaged on these issues to almost kind of trick them into caring and thinking about this stuff that matters a lot to me, that's a win. And it just felt like there was just kind of this burning need to get, you know, so it's a short novel. You know, at first, when I first started, I thought it was just going to be a novella. There's just kind of a burning need to get it out of me. Whereas, you know, the Twain story is important to me. I think it could be really good and interesting. That said, there's no huge rush in getting out a book about 1861. You know, I'd like to do it before I die, but this one, the relevancy and just kind of getting out there and maybe in some small way contributing to the fight, it took precedence.
Yeah. And then are you feeling like you do want to get away from military-based things? You know, because it does. Like, I hate to wear the Letterman jacket all the time. I always say, like, I'm a terrible veteran. I don't have like a hat and all that. I don't wear a grand style shirt, you know, but because I just don't want to be that guy, you know. It's great anybody who loves it, and I don't, you know, judge anybody with that, but that's just not who I am.
I hear that so much. I mean, this stuff interests me. I like writing about it. At the same time, I like writing about other stuff too. Like some of the favorite. I wrote an article for Wired a few years ago about big buck hunter, playing big buck hunter and going to the world championships for that. I did an article for ESPN a few years ago about through hiking. I love that. I love that stuff. And you know, yeah, it helps to like prove to people that I'm not just quote unquote a war writer, but you know, fuck them, right? Like it's more to, I know I'm interested in other stuff, that I care about other stuff. It's also just kind of, you know, let's be honest. Too much of this stuff can put you in a dark hole, right? So you know, escaping to 1861 Virginia City, and you know, learning about these people's problems and challenges and issues, and you know, a lot of them, frankly, I say getting away from it, but hell, a lot of those characters were veterans from both the North and the South, fleeing war, just trying to leave their past behind, looking kind of bring this conversation full circle, looking for a new sense of purpose. So you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just finding a very different way to tell, to tap into the same issues. But at least it's, I don't know. At least it's a little different. And I don't know. I also just want to write about Nevada. I've never really written about Nevada, and that's definitely on my bucket list.
I hear you, and I'm the same way with, especially my little hometown in California. You know, there's just a lot of rich history there, and you know, there's a lot of neat stuff. And your town and my town, they're linked, you know, because we were like the last stop before you got to like the big part of the Bay Area, you know. Okay. And there's just neat. I was just about to tell you, there's a book by a guy named Jim DeFelice, who's become a friend of mine because of the show, and he wrote about the Pony Express. It's probably the best book about the Pony Express, and he's got so much detail there. It's an amazing book, and you just want someone to make a movie about it because it's just such a great story. And here's this thing. The Pony Express lasted for like 18 months. That's it.
Really?
But it's just it's shocking. And I'm like, wait, 18 months? Are you sure about that? And he's like, I wrote the book, Pete. And I'm like, 18 months. But it's just so rich with it's just such a big part of who we are as a nation. We always talk about it. But yeah, it was obsolete right away because the telegraph came and the trains and all that. And I was like, done. But these things happen and they come right through that corridor, you know, and it's just these things all link together in time, and the characters all come through, and it's just such a neat era of history, you know, as we do. And the reason why, the whole reason for his story is the election of Abraham Lincoln and that news, and it comes via the Pony Express. It's like Lincoln won, and it changes certain parts of history because of that, but it comes on a horse. So there's all kinds of crazy things, and that ride comes through like the Mormon Wars, through Utah and everything, and all these things that no one knows about unless you're from the West and you're like, there are Mormon Wars. Like, yeah, well, it's crazy time. But
big time.
Yeah. And those are great stories, and it just doesn't get told, and all the stuff to the south with all the stuff with the Apaches, and oh man, it's such a great history laden area, and it's great that people write about that stuff. So I'm really excited to hear about that book when you're ready. Anything else you want to get into before we wrap this thing up? Any questions you want to ask me?
That's a good. Yeah. How do you think we can get people, everyday Americans, to engage with Ukraine and the ongoing war there? Like if you get dinner or drinks later with a friend who's like, I don't understand why this matters to me. How would you try to convince them? I'm actually working on some projects with the Ukraine thing, and it's very challenging to get the projects even going in the right direction. It is hard because it is a European problem, right? And our foreign policy has created a problem that I don't know that it is. I'm not 50-50 on this, and I'm not saying that Ukraine needs to be part of it. I'm not saying that, but this is not cut and dried, right? It is wrong that Russia invaded them. But I'm not going to be mad at an American that says, why did we give them all this money, right? And then you have the Ukrainian corruption problem. And so it is really hard to give a clean answer for that. Yes, Russia shouldn't have invaded Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine is corrupt. Yes, a lot of the money we give them and have given them did not go to the war effort. Yes, the money we've given them has helped them stave off Russia. Yes, we did not give them enough stuff to beat Russia. And so there's all these like on the fence. And so it is hard to put together a solid case where I couldn't contradict myself. And we've also picked people. We've laid down our foreign policy. Whoosh, bam. And we said, anybody on the left of this, they're assholes. Right.
But only because we laid down this policy, right? It has nothing to do with who's actually an asshole. It has everything, like, just because we picked this line to our benefit, and we just said, anybody over there is a jerk, anybody on this side is good. And that's not even necessarily true, because the people on this side, there's plenty of assholes over here and plenty of assholes over there. Plenty of, know. So the more I've learned about it, the more I'm just like, I don't know. I know it's expensive. And I know that, I don't have the answers, but when you look at it, I know that people are dying. I know a lot of men are dying, and when men die, women get exploited, and all of that's horrible. And so I would say, I just want it to end, and if that means getting people to the table, and I know that when it does end, it's going to be Americans and Russians sitting down and coming to a deal that really has very little to do with Ukrainians. And hopefully it's a calm ending, and it's not like a hotspot kind of war. And I believe Putin that we probably blew up that pipeline. Like, I believe that shit, because there's only so many people that can do that, So we've done a lot of things that are at least very likely us, because we do shit like that. We have the capability of blowing up dams, and so
it's certainly not a coincidence that so many Russian generals have been successfully eliminated. I'm sure Ukrainians pulled the trigger, but no, I would not be surprised if some
those
American-generated intelligence may we may have helped out. Helped out there.
And so and we love a weaker Russia. There's entire stacks of PhDs from people who work in think tanks. Are like, this is how and they've been waiting their entire lives for this to happen. And so they're like, yes, finally I'm relevant. And these are the academic versions of those guys spoiling for this fight so they can run to the front lines. And these guys are on the academic front lines. That's 100% true. And so it makes me uncomfortable trying to say, boy, we need Ukraine in this fight. I think we need this fight more than Ukraine needed it, and that bugs the fuck out of me, because I think people are dying because we manifest this fight, in a lot of ways. I don't like that.
I will push back there just at the very end, because, an anecdote that comes to mind is out east. We visited some villages that had just been occupied by Russian troops. And I met an old lady named Hannah, 76 years old, native Russian speaker. She was sweeping up her courtyard because these soldiers being sold, they just trashed this house, trashed the entire place. She's the kind of person that Putin thinks he's liberating. That probably before the war may have identified as Russian and said, in a peaceful transition, that's my nationality. She insisted, because our interpreter is from the west of Ukraine, and she could figure that out pretty quickly. She insisted on speaking Ukrainian, even though she spoke it very poorly. We finally teased out of her why, and it was because, 8 months before, the Russians had killed her grandson. He'd been fighting with the border guard, and I do worry that kind of in the geopolitical conversations about this, and there's no doubt that the American military-industrial complex is thrilled by this, and that a lot of the PhDs and think tank gurus are living out some Cold War fantasies. Ukrainian agency is real. The CIA did not initiate the Maidan revolution, social revolution in 2013 and 2014. They want these things, right? They're the Ukrainian agency,
for sure.
But I do, unfortunately, I think you're right that, like, however this ends, when it ends, it's to bring up Orwell again. He was talking about the Spanish Civil War. The solution was brokered in Rome, Berlin, London, anywhere but Spain. And I can't help but think that the same thing is going to happen away from Ukraine and going to happen to Ukraine. So I want Ukrainians want peace. I just really hope this peace doesn't come with Russians being able to continue to destroy cities and kidnap Ukrainian children to take them to what are essentially cultural re-education camps.
Yeah, and your pushback, it was in no way contested by me, because it's what I'm saying very poorly is that it is hard to stand firmly on any one position, because as soon as you do, you're like, this is it's all terrible, and it's I understand why everybody is sick of putting billions of dollars into it. And I also understand why people are like, we have to finish this fight, and I just don't know where you can put any strong purchase on any one position. It's just like Afghanistan. Like, if we just simply stay, it's an inexpensive thing, and we just continue just to slog it out, we can maybe over time get better at this. But we weren't. And so we got a lot of people killed, but they were going to die anyhow. So what the hell, so I don't know. And you're right. We are absolutely going to broker a deal at the expense of the Ukrainians, no matter what we do. And we're going to come there with the same playbook we always come with. And it's going to be these solutions that don't work and cost us more money. I just don't.
Without a doubt, money will be wasted. Whatever decision is reached, there's no doubt that
some people will get rich. Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. The cynic, but only because we've seen this. It's not really cynicism. It's just proven that. The actual Uncle Sam, the real life Uncle Sam, was a Civil War war profiteer. Selling meat to the Union troops. So it's a proud American tradition, unfortunately. We will. I promise we will. It'll be a good YouTube short. I promise we will go to Ukraine and teach Ukrainian farmers how to farm. We will do that. We will do that. All right. I don't want to take any more of your time, guys. It's awesome. I appreciate it. Everybody definitely go out and there's the link right below. It'd be out in 10, 11 days. It's called Daybreak, and it's Matt Gallagher's latest book. Some people call him Sir. We call him Matt around here. Thank you, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. Anything you want to say before I roll these credits?
Just enjoyed the conversation, Pete. Thanks for talking with me. Appreciate it.
All right, stand by. I'll be right back to say goodbye to you. Everybody else, thanks.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.